Welcome to My Bookcase Slays, a podcast where we discuss killer reads. My name is Melissa Westemeyer, and I am so excited to welcome our guest today, Sally Smith, all the way from the UK, to talk about her newest release, A Case of Life and Limb. Welcome to the show, Sally.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
This is the second in a new series featuring Gabriel Ward. Can you tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind this series?
Yes, I'm a barrister in England, which is, I think you would call a trial lawyer in the States. And in England, lawyers who are trial lawyers are all in four associations in London, the Four Inns of Court. And I have been associated with one of them, the Inner Temple, which is an absolutely ancient, many centuries, since the 1400s at least, organization, which is centered in a small area of London, 14 acres of London, called the Temple. And I have worked there all my working life, and I'm fortunate enough to have a flat there. So I'm very much steeped in this very cloistered little world. As I say, ancient buildings surrounding a church and gardens, where practicing lawyers have their offices, and some people are lucky enough to live. And I'm interested in the history of the law. And this is a series set in 1900, a barrister like me living and working in the Temple in 1900.
It's got a wonderfully rich sense of setting, and I was not surprised to read that you knew the place so intimately. I can picture like foggy nights in London. It's so close, but in the way you describe the proximity to the hustle and bustle of everything else going on in London at this time, the horses and carriages passing, but it's all a little distant from this immediate space.
Yes, I'm glad I've got that over, because it was certainly true then, and it is true to this day. It's surrounded by walls and hedges and railings, and it's got ported gateways in, so that it's completely separate, but it's set between London's embankment along the River Thames on one side and the famous Fleet Street on the other side. And you can actually, when the gates are open, if you look out of the windows, you can see the sort of passing feet to this day from Fleet Street, which is a teeming, bustling, ordinary London street. And you can see the traffic, I can see it at this moment, teeming past on the embankment. And in the middle, as I say, there's this little area which is pedestrianised, and gardens and cobbled squares, and very picturesque. So it is a strange little bubble.
Is it as private still as the way you describe it in the book? I was really curious to know.
Well, the public can walk through during the day if they wish to. The gates are open until midnight. At midnight, everything closes, and if you're a resident and you want to get in after that, you have to ring the bell and a porter comes and lets you in. But during the day, yes, lots and lots of tourists come in because it's very beautiful. And they come to see the Temple Church, but they can't actually sort of go into any of the other buildings unless they on a guided tour or they have a permission or an invitation. But it's a wonderful area of London to come and look around. But it is kind of hidden because, as I say, in Fleet Street, it's just big gates. And so unless people know, they don't realise that you can come into this sort of different little world.
I found that fascinating. I have been to London a few times. I have seen the Temple stop on the tube as a station. Is that what this is referring to? Is it the same place?
Yes.
I never knew about this history. It was so neat to read about.
Well, can I say, the next time that you get on the Underground and you see the Temple tube station, get off. This is such a complicated, sort of obscure history, but there are four Inns of Court, and they are quite famous: Gray's Inn and Lincoln's Inn, and then Inner Temple and Middle Temple. And the Inner and Middle Temple are together the Temple, and they're an area of 15 acres, united by the Temple Church in the middle because of its prior history with the Knights Crusaders who built the church, which has nothing to do with the lawyers. And then the lawyers moved in the 1300s, and then we've been here ever since. So when the Temple tube station was built, it was called the Temple after us, and it's a minute's walk from the gates, the main gates of the Temple.
So the history and the setting just had me so excited because this is exactly the type of historical mystery I love to read when the place is someplace that's brand new to me, but a little bit familiar too on the same token. Your main character, Gabriel, what an interesting character. Without coming straight out and telling us he has peculiar ways of thinking about the world and behaviors, you show it really well. Can you talk about how this character was inspired?
Well, he's a just very briefly for your listeners. He's a reclusive barrister, very very clever man, very solitary, living, as I say, in a flat in the Temple, which he hasn't really left except to go to the courts opposite for a very long time. Of course, as I say, I'm writing about 1901, so that's the year Queen Victoria died. From then on, the books span a few years after that. And in those times, of course, the bar was exclusively men. There were no women barristers, nor allowed to be. And the men came from a very, very uniform background. I did some studies on it for a different reason. About 82% of them came from the same 5 public schools,
Oh,
our
wow.
private schools, and the big names, Eton, Harrow, Winchester, and others. And they all went to Oxford or Cambridge, no other universities, and then they became barristers. They all came from relatively aristocratic backgrounds. And so if you were a shy man, as my detective is, you never got out of the same environment. The public schools were all ancient buildings around grassy meadows and with churches in the middle. They went on to one of the Oxbridge colleges, were exactly the same. Then they came on to the Temple, which is exactly the same. And I think it had an effect. My understanding is there were quite a lot of bachelors who didn't really have any reason to be, except that they were, as I say, they were shy. They'd never really come out into the world at all. And so they kind of stayed in this very, very male public school environment for the whole of their lives. And my Gabriel, my hero, is one of those kind of men. So it was partly that. His oddities, it's not giving anything away. In the first book, A Case of Mice and Murder, you hear that he has what nowadays we would call OCD. I think that's a bit of an occupational hazard for lawyers, quite honestly. He is just an exaggerated version of what we all are, which is very careful, very used to checking things 5 times over.
Mm-hmm.
And in his case, because, as I say, he's a shy, reclusive man, it's manifested itself in solitary habits that have grown and grown and rather govern his life. But he's a happy man despite all that. But he's a slight oddity.
There's a lovely scene that you describe in his childhood when he recognizes he's set apart and he doesn't view the social world in the same way as his peers, as his family, but he decides while standing I think he's on a beach when this event happens,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And he discovers within himself a sort of resilience and decisiveness, like, this is who I am and I am enough and I will be
yes,
okay.
yes, yes. As I say, it's very nice to hear you talking like this, because that you never know whether you get things over as an author, and that is indeed what I was trying to get at. He is not lonely, he is solitary, and he is a genuinely very self-sufficient man. And what other people, in the book will criticize him for it and think he's a bit of a joke, but he's happy. He has a way of living that, however peculiar it may seem to other people, suits him. And yes, you're right. That was he was an only child, inevitably, and there is a scene in the book when he is remembering standing on the beach when he's a small boy of sort of 6 or 7 and thinking to himself, I've got everything that I ever want inside me. And of course, in some ways that's a very lonely place to be, and one which most of us wouldn't want. But in others, it's quite reassuring, because it means, you're in control of everything. You're just you, and you're not really very worried about everything else. But the
And I
books,
love, yeah, that's one
sorry.
of my favorite things about his character is he's okay. He's not worried about everybody else or what
Mm,
they think of him, I guess.
mm. Yes, he isn't, and during the books he's grown a bit since the first one, in which he didn't really engage with other people around him. And then he gets flung into it inadvertently by having to be an amateur detective, which he doesn't want to do. And he begins to learn that no man is an island, and he warms up a bit as the books progress, as he gets to know people. And as readers will discover, he pals up with a very young working class policeman, and they have absolutely no points of reference at all. But they discover that they do, that they're both the same kind of people, despite the disparity in their backgrounds. And so he makes a friend, in effect.
And Inspector Wright and Gabriel seem, it's really neat to me how they learn from one another.
Yes, they both have things, of course, that they can learn. I mean, Wright has very little formal education, and he's overawed and impressed by the world in the Temple and the prosperity and the learning and all the things that went with being a very senior barrister in 1900. So that's a world that opens up to him. And Gabriel, he's come from this aristocratic background, as I say, incredibly privileged all the way through. And he discovers that Wright, who's brought up in the East End of London in a big family and loving family, has something to give as well. But when they first meet, of course, Gabriel's an absolute bibliophile. He sits in rooms surrounded by books all day. Wright has never read a book except, his book learning until he was 14 at school. And they have to find their way towards each other across the boundaries and the gulfs. And they do, and I think they do so. As I say, they get to like each other.
Yeah, you can really see the arc of the relationship. In this book, it pulls a little further. The trust is building, and they begin to refer to one another. And there's a lovely scene toward the end, without spoiling anything about the plot, which we're going to get to in just a second, listener, where Gabriel recognizes that he inadvertently hurts Inspector Wright's feelings and is quick to remedy it. And you sense that he probably wouldn't have cared so much in the past. And that's pretty neat.
Yes, I think, well, he might have cared. I think he probably wouldn't have recognized it as much in the past.
Thank you. Yes, I care, because he's not insensitive to other people, but you're right.
No.
Catching on to it.
Yeah, and he learns his background is so privileged that he has an inevitable, arrogance is perhaps too strong a word, but the inevitable self-confidence that goes with that. And it's never actually dawned on him that he and all his colleagues adopt a sort of attitude towards all the servants in the temple, and that they make assumptions about what they like and do, which are wrong. And as you say, he inadvertently hurts his feelings and recognizes it and puts his hands up to it.
Yeah. So he takes on a very unusual and unexpected case in a case of life and limb. So there's a few different plots happening at the same time, and it's pretty masterful how you pull everything together at the end without spoiling anything for readers who are going to love how twisty this is. Like, it's so super twisty. But we have the opening scene. There is a box delivered to another barrister, and inside is a limb from a dead body. And then there is a famous actress who needs help with a libel case. She wants Gabriel because she's done her research and she has decided he is the best of the best, and she wants his representation in court. And we have a little side hustle with another bit of a diva in this story. Liam shows up and wreaks a little bit of havoc. So talk to me about what was the genesis? This book started with one idea, I'm sure, just like all books do. What was the scene that struck you first?
Well, I think with both of them, with its predecessor and this one, the thing that I really thought was important was that Gabriel is a reluctant detective who gets pushed into it. But first and foremost, he's a barrister. And, if you are a trial lawyer, the only thing that matters to you in the world for much of your life is the trial that you're involved in at that moment. And so I started off with both of them with the dual idea that whilst he is investigating a murder, he's at the same time conducting what seems to be, and may well be, a completely unrelated big case. So that he's got the pressure of being in court all day and having to meet witnesses and sort out what's going on and look after his client. And at the same time, he's coming back to the temple in the evenings, and everyone's on at him because he's supposed to be investigating a murder. So that was the genesis, was the thinking of him as a lawyer and as a detective.
So dual worlds colliding here. And it's interesting because it's a murder, but we only have body parts.
Yes, it's there's no body. That's right. Yes. Well, I mean, there must be somewhere, but no one knows what or who.
And that is a very difficult question to answer for him.
Very. Yes, very difficult.
Because you just have parts and you don't know where they're coming from or who they're coming from. It was interesting to see his process of trying to parse that all out. You gave him a real tough crime to solve.
Well, I mean, the only way I could really do that was to think to myself, if in the unlikely event that somebody sent me a body part through the post and I had to discover, when there is no body, where the body part came from, how would I go about it? And of course, this is not a plot spoiler, but I mean, the first port of call will inevitably be a pathologist or a doctor in 1900 who could give you some idea of whether they could tell what gender the body was, what age it was, what socio-economic background it came from, and then you can build from there. And that is indeed what Gabriel does.
Readers will love knowing that your pathologist is another delightful character. I hope we see more of him in future books because he's a little quirky.
Yes, he is. Gabriel knows him because he was at Oxford University with him, and he comes from a very different background from Gabriel, but he's a very clever doctor, and he's developed into being an expert in pathology. But he's an eccentric man, yes. And he's at St Bartholomew's Hospital, which again is an ancient hospital in London, a real hospital. And he has an amazingly quirky room and is an unusual personality. So I hope he'll come into another one. I agree.
You have a heavy lift of a book here with a very twisty plot, some wonderfully developed characters. You bounce around a little bit with different perspectives, which I think gives a richer version of the story because you have to pull us out of Gabriel's head and put us into some other characters once in a while. The setting is amazing. The historical setting is amazing. I can't imagine how you keep it all straight. So you have to let the readers know, are you a big time plotter? I'm picturing you in a room with like 1,000 bulletin boards and all of these details surrounding you. How does this work?
Well, I'm a very, very amateur novelist, I'm afraid. I'm a better lawyer than I am a novelist, I think. And you're right, people do these extraordinary things. And since I've written this, I've been to book festivals and met people who do indeed have all these coloured cards. And I think, oh, God, that's how you do it. But I don't do it like that. I mean, I do make them up as I go along. I do think years as a lawyer drafting things has given me quite a retentive verbal memory, so that I do remember for words. I remember words. I don't write down anything. I just evolve them in my head. And of course, I'm sure it is very amateur to do it like that, because you do have to keep going back and rewriting bits because, you know, everything has to eventually tie in. But I approach it in a sort of iterative way. And, you know, I begin to write and then I think, oh gosh, you know, I can't have body parts in parcels arriving at Christmas time when I've had it sunny in the chapter before. So I have to go back and rewrite. So as I say, I don't think I'm very efficient, and I probably take longer than I should, but I don't really plan. I mean, having said that, you do have to have a synopsis of the plot because the publishers require that to begin with. I do know where I'm going in the broadest of terms, and I know who the murderer is and how it's all going to sort out, and then I just get on with it.
You had me fooled. I was going with a completely different ending until the very last chapters, and then
I'm delighted to hear that.
And I'm not questioning the ending you came up with. I was obviously very wrong, but it made sense why it ended the way it did. But you should know, it was the suspense for me was definitely there.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
On a personal level, I'm sitting here in awe of you. You're a barrister. You've got this amazing wealth of historical knowledge. You've written 2 fantastic novels. I am aware there's a third on pace, probably more. Sally, you seem to be able to do it all. What is a superpower that you'd like to have that you don't currently possess?
Honestly, I have no superpowers at all. I'm absolutely hopeless, inadequate in many, many ways. When I began, I was still in practice. I'm not any longer. And so I'm writing full time. And I mean, the rest of my life has really been, a barrister going from case to case, case to case, case to case. And I wrote a legal, I have always been interested in legal history. I got involved in a very, very long public inquiry. And I began to give myself sort of something else to think about some of the time. I began a legal biography, which I published whilst I was still in practice. And then I was going to go on at the bar, and I was thinking about another biography, and then COVID struck. And so my novel was really a COVID novel. I was at home. I couldn't do any research. I couldn't do any work. I love reading stories, and I like detective stories. And I just thought, well, I'll have a go. And I've been very lucky since then. I found an agent and a publisher, and then it took off. But I still feel as though I'm really learning every day how to do it.
Well, clearly you have a curious mind, but also brilliant because this book is fantastic. What else are you reading? What is a book that you're recommending other people read?
I like Janice Hallett.
Oh, yes. She's great.
She's great. And I know it's some way back now, but I recently read The Appeal, which I enjoyed very much. I thought it was an absolutely terrific book and a wonderful sort of take on an epistolary novel, done in email.
Yes,
It's extremely
definitely.
clever. I like that hugely. I read a lot of so-called golden age stuff, partly because it's helpful to me as I'm writing in the same kind of style.
Right.
I love Dorothy L. Sayers, Josephine Tay, Marjorie Allingham, that sort of crowd. So I read a lot of those. I'm not a huge modern fiction reader. I read a lot more biography than I do fiction. I love biographies, which, I don't care who they're about, really. They've got sort of beginnings and middles and ends, and they're real stories, and I'm always seduced by those. But I'm not in a grand way at all, but I'm pretty Catholic in my tastes. I do read all the time, and pretty much anything that comes to hand, in fact.
That's great. What beverage would you recommend pairs nicely when a reader is enjoying a case of Life and Limb?
What beverage?
Yes.
Oh, non-alcoholic or alcoholic, or how can I choose?
I'm whatever your preference is.
I think probably a nice glass of dry white wine.
Okay.
But if you're being non-alcoholic, I almost live on black coffee, so I think I have a good mug of really good coffee.
A good black coffee. Okay. Or a dry white wine. I like that. That's quite an interesting mix. Maybe one for in the evening and one for the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly.
And when is book 3 hitting bookstores? Do you know the publication date yet?
It's in the editing process at the moment, and I think they're planning on late autumn next year, October, November of next year.
All right.
It doesn't have a name yet, so that's anybody's guess. And it's one of 4. I had two book contracts, so I'm on the third one of the second contract, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So Gabriel is going to appear in 4 in all.
Hopefully more, because this, like I said,
after that,
it's a great. I know no small thing to create book after book after book, but great characters, wonderful setting, really cool to learn the history about the temple and the way the law worked and the relationships between all the different legal elements in London during the 1900s when you wrote this. Even the relationship between the City of London and the City Police, and then the larger Scotland Yard.
Metropolitan, yes, which is the big London force. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's an interesting, the temple is technically part of the City of London. It's within the square mile of the City of London. But it is its own little world within that, and it has all kinds of ancient restrictions on who can come in and what they can do, including one relating to the police. And actually, that was one of the other inspirations for the book. It's the only area of London where the police officially can only come in with the consent of the temple. I mean, obviously nowadays that's nothing but a formality. But in the past, the temple did actually say, well, this is a private place and the police can't come in unless we ask them. Hence them asking my protagonist to be an amateur detective for them. So it works out historically very, very nicely.
It really does. Well, congratulations on the book, Sally. Thank you for participating in the podcast today and telling readers about A Case of Life and Limb. And good luck as you work on.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for talking to me. It's been very interesting. Thank you.
And shout out to the Authors on the Air Radio Network for being part of the production of this podcast. Thanks.
Thank you.